Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. So today, our topic of discussion for the next 60 minutes is going to be e-commerce marketing. And what we're going to do is we're going to give you a basic understanding of what's happening in e-commerce, and more importantly, what you can do in your business to improve the sales of products or services online. My name is Andrew Patricia, and I've always been a business owner. And today I'm happy to have Marco, who's been involved in e-commerce for quite a few years, and he's going to share with us some of his experience and background, and more importantly, what we can do to grow our businesses. So Marco, just for us to get started, the last 2 years have been very, very challenging for many small businesses. What has been taking place? What changes are taking place? Are there anything new that we should know? Give us a bit of background.
Absolutely. And just before we get into that, I will just introduce myself to the folks who don't know me. Some of you maybe do, if you've come to some of these My Main Street events before, if you've watched the webinars from last year, any of those sort of things, you might be familiar with me. But if you are not, the reason that I'm here, the reason I'm qualified to talk here, I worked for years at Shopify, which obviously is a very large e-commerce company. I was in marketing there. And since I left Shopify, I was working in e-commerce marketing for smaller e-commerce companies. So helping individual smaller brands, probably like a lot of the brands here, work out how to really thrive in what is always, but especially now, is an ever-changing e-commerce environment. And so, I've had sort of the look from both sides at what that looks like on the technology side, on people that are driving the trends, and also on the side of people that are always trying to catch up, that are always trying to keep ahead of the trends, and obviously are trying to use e-commerce marketing to sell products and services. So to your point, Andrew, the thing that has happened in the last 2 years is, and Chris was saying a lot of these people are, new business owners. If you're new to e-commerce and it feels incredibly difficult right now for you, it's because it is incredibly difficult right now for you. We had a boost during the pandemic. At the beginning of COVID, there was really this boost in, local e-commerce, shopping online, small companies, spending small, supporting the small business. And as we've seen things sort of return to normal here in Canada, we have seen not an entire reversal of that trend, but we've seen it become much, much more difficult to survive as a small business. We've seen people almost reverting back in a reactionary way to buying more things from bigger companies. And it's become harder for us as small businesses to really stand out in the way that we once could. The other issue that we're having at the exact same time, it's sort of a perfect storm, is advertising is getting more difficult and it's getting more expensive. And then a third trend that we're seeing at the same time is that right before we entered this, whatever you want to call it, this tough financial time that we're facing right now, that all businesses are facing right now, there was an influx of venture capitalist funding into the e-commerce startup space. So when small businesses like you and I are competing for ad dollars, what we're competing against not only is more established brands, not only is more international brands, but we're competing with brands that have had this influx, this cash infusion, that are masquerading as small businesses just like us, but actually who are funded by large VC funds. So we have a few things stacked against us that are making things more difficult, but obviously not impossible. I think we've seen the same trend in the last, if we look at a sort of 8-year cycle, what we're seeing is sort of the conditions that we saw that, all of the original e-commerce trends like direct to consumer, all of these things have emerged out of a similar time where it was really, really difficult to do e-commerce, and then it became really, really easy. Unfortunately, that really, really easy time where you could just spin up an e-commerce store, use some drop shipping, do some ads, do whatever it might be, and that was all cheap and easy. Those times are not right now. They might be around the corner. There might be another e-commerce revolution, but right now, what it's about, especially as a small business, is really how do we compete and how do we keep moving on into the future as we're going into this much more difficult time in e-commerce in general, but specifically in e-commerce marketing.
And that's a really interesting background. I really appreciate giving us a bit of background, because I find that a lot of us now, a lot of small business owners, are obviously struggling with their marketing. So it's quite comforting to hear that background, so that that it's a common thing. So I'm going to start off with the really simple stuff. And one of my first questions is, when we create e-commerce sites, do you have some really simple design tips, some really basics that we should be getting right on our e-commerce sites so that we can make it a good customer experience? It looks good, it fits in with our brand. Can you give us some tips on what we need to do on e-commerce sites?
Yeah, the thing that I always say, to business owners and to my clients or anyone that asks really, is that you should leave the job of the designing to the people who do this as a job. So any e-commerce platform you choose, of course, like I said, I came from Shopify, I use Shopify, most people use Shopify, but the primary feature really of any e-commerce platform now is going to be the online store. That's the main thing that people care about, or at least people who don't already have a store care about. They care about what's the store going to look like, how do I look professional, and all of these sort of things. When the reality is that almost any theme that you can choose on any of these e-commerce builders is really going to be well designed and set up to make your store look professional and beautiful. So the idea of looking professional, of seeming authentic as an e-commerce store, it really comes out of an insecurity. If you have an e-commerce store, you are authentic. You're not pretending to have an e-commerce store, you do have one. So choose a simple theme. And once you've chosen that simple theme, really your job is not to interrupt or get in the way of the functionality that those designers have created. So if you just install a theme and add a product, usually that store will convert very well. And generally, it's when we try to overcomplicate things that we start to run into issues with conversions, with things like abandoned carts or people running into dead links, or, sort of the functionality of our website not even working in the way that we expect it to, which happens to more people than you would think. So my advice generally for when you're starting in e-commerce, or even if you're an established brand, is to, let me think of how to phrase this. You have to assume the worst of your consumers. And by that, I mean, assume that if you give them an opportunity to do the wrong thing, they will do the wrong thing. So you have to think about what is the right thing. What do you want them to do? Is there one product that you want them to buy when they get to your store? If that is true, make it almost impossible to do anything else but buy that one product. So when we're thinking about designing e-commerce, really what we're thinking about is foolproofing a website. So start with a goal, think about what you want your consumers to be doing, and sort of design your website around that as much as possible. Don't try look like another website. Don't try look like a big competitor who has a team of 6,000 people designing their store, and they're running a million tests. So they have a design that we think we understand. We look at other e-commerce stores and we say, oh, I really want mine to look like that or function like that. But we don't know the research, the testing, the reasoning behind why anyone else has designed their store the way that they have. So my advice is always know why you are designing a store in the way that you are, know what your desired outcome is from your customers, and focus very specifically on making it incredibly easy to do that exact thing. So again, if you only have one product, or if you have a hero product that you're trying to sell, or if you have a sale, make this the main thing that people can and will do on your website. So not only keep it simple, but keep it painfully simple, keep it impossibly simple, make it almost impossible to do the wrong thing when you visit your website.
That's some great advice. One of the things that I often get asked by small business owners is, when I look at their websites, is often the bad photography. Do you have some tips on, photography for websites? Because I think, when it comes to image and branding, I think it's quite an important thing. Do you have any tips on that, on photographs of products on different stores?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting point that you bring up. I mean, we live in a day and age where, so much of our internet consumption is image-based. So much of our ability to take photos is, infinitely greater than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, even 5 years ago. Everyone has a phone, all phones have a camera, and yet you still see stores that have, product photography that isn't sort of up to scratch. Now, the thing that we want to think about when it comes to product photography is not that we need it to be incredible. If you are a bathing suit brand, but you're based in Barrie, you don't need to fly to the Bahamas to take product photos. What you need is for your photos to not make your product look bad. So what we're talking about here is a baseline. There's a certain low bar of expectation, a normal, well-lit, evenly lit photo, and we're going to talk about the technicality of that in a second. But this is the bar. And if you're at that bar, going above that bar is slightly beneficial, but it's diminishing returns. So don't worry about having, this extravagant product photography. What you really want is simple product photography. And in order to achieve that, in order to achieve product photography that is good enough, and good enough in e-commerce means that it's great, again, because we all have the ability to take amazing photos on the technology that we have at hand, whether that's an iPhone or, you have a nephew that has a GoPro or whatever it is. Cameras are so accessible these days. I would say two things. Find in your life a young person, as young as possible, above sort of 13, but we're talking about a teenager here. Find a 16-year-old, a 19-year-old, a 20-year-old, a 25-year-old, a 30-year-old. Find a young person, get them to look at your website, get them to tell you honestly what they think of the quality of your images. If they do not think that your images are good enough, or if you don't think that your images are good enough, your next step is to do that exact same thing, is to turn to your community, is to turn to, the younger people in your family or in your community or in your business if you have staff, and you can get them to take the photos. It's very easy to look up on YouTube how to take great product photography. It's so simple that you can explain it right now. Generally, the key to taking great product photography is a white background and even lighting. That's it. Even lighting, no shadows, just even lighting, just your product on white. If you can achieve that, you are at the same bar as, the best e-commerce in the world. You don't need to go above that. So approach somebody in your community. If you know somebody that really likes photography, it'll be the most boring thing that they do all day, but they will definitely be able to achieve that level of quality that you're looking for. So the bar isn't high, and there's a lot of people that even if you don't think so, that can help you achieve that. So find somebody that's interested. I think e-commerce specifically, we think about it from our perspective. We think about the fact that, we run businesses on e-commerce, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But as we all know, the longer we stay in e-commerce, it's an ecosystem. A lot of people make their money from this ecosystem. So we, of course, make our money by selling products and services, but there's a whole ecosystem of people, web designers, graphic designers, photographers, who make money from helping us. That's what they're there for. So look in your community, ask around for other business owners, ask around, anywhere that you gather with people, and see if anybody knows a photographer who's willing to take a product photo. They don't have to be amazing. They don't even have to be very experienced, to be honest, as long as you can give them a reference and they can match it. And that reference just has to be white background, clean, no shadows. So this could be a great opportunity, even if you have a university student who's into photography, or somebody who's just graduated who's trying to get into product photography. There are people who are out there looking for that opportunity, but obviously they can't help you unless you know that you need help, or unless you seek them out. But once you start doing that, there's an endless supply of people who can help you with it. So again, get advice from people who are going to be honest with you. I think this is a big thing when it comes to e-commerce, is when we don't know, sometimes we're okay to not know. We would rather not know. If our photography is bad, a lot of us would rather not have somebody in our family say, you know what, this actually isn't that good and I don't like it, and maybe you should redo it. But we have to be brave. That's what it takes to be successful, is we have to be willing to listen to that criticism, to get that feedback. That is so important. So get that feedback from your community, specifically from younger people, because they spend so much time online. They know what the baseline is for good or bad. And then if you need to change anything, get some help from your community, ask younger people in your community. Someone will know somebody that will be able to take these photos for you.
Wonderful. So here's another question, quite a broad question, but I think it's worth asking. Is what marketing channels do you think will drive the most revenue? So I'm new to e-commerce, or I'm a small business owner that has an e-commerce store. What marketing channels do you recommend I focus on?
The channel that I always recommend is email. And I want to qualify that email is an extremely effective channel, but it's not exactly the fastest growth channel. The reason that I always recommend email is because email is incredibly reliable. And in order to sell on email, customers need to already know who we are because they need to have already given us their email. So these are warm leads. These are people who know about our business. These are people who hopefully are interested in our industry because they gave us their email. So we're making an assumption here. This is another point. Don't use email lists that are not yours. Never do that. That'll never work for you. It'll never convert into customers. But I think email, whenever I start working with clients, this is the very first thing that I want to establish. This is the channel that I am the most excited about because email is really, really reliable. With email, it can almost become a formula. What email allows you to do is create a lot of data. So you can know that if I send out an email, 10% of my email list opens that email and 5% of my email list buys from that email. Now this is simple math. 5% of 100 may not be, a lot of sales or a lot of money, but 5% of 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000, we can extrapolate out the math. So this is what I love about emails. It's really, really data driven. So one of the first things that I always encourage people to do is get email as a channel. What that usually means is finding an email platform. So Klaviyo generally, I think, is the one that people are using these days. It's certainly the one that I use. There might be other things that are better out there. I know that Shopify has a built-in email that I don't have much experience with, but I know that that tool does exist. And that is my favorite tool for building. Then you put a little pop-up on your website. We've all seen those pop-ups that say, hey, do you want to join our team or our family or our squad or whatever people are saying? We'll give you 5% or 10% or 15% off your first purchase. All you need to do is put your email in. And then for the rest of our lives, these people can send us an email directly. It's that effective. So I think that is the strongest. In my experience, in all my years of doing this, email has always been the most reliable. It has always been the strongest channel. It has always been the one that I turn to first. And if you're going to get good at one channel, I would always recommend getting good at email first because it's incredibly intimate. But the challenge is this, is that you need to then work out how to get people into that email channel. So the temptation is to do mass marketing, to do things like Facebook, Instagram, which we know don't work as well anymore, to do Google, to do Tumblr, to do all of these things. And yes, this will get us in front of bigger audiences, but these audiences will never, ever, 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 ever convert as strong as email will. And it's because in order to email somebody, they need to have taken a leap of faith in the first place. They need to have liked us enough. They need to have been aware enough of us to say, you know what, I will give this brand my email. They say they're going to email me this, this, and that. I believe them. I will let them email me for the rest of time is essentially the agreement that we're making when we give somebody our email. So that is the channel that I would always recommend building first. And actually, not to, not that this is a tangent, but because, this is more of a discussion that we're having. Actually, what we're seeing happening in marketing now, and if you're not aware of what I'm talking about, it's Instagram, Facebook, Google getting so expensive, going exponentially more expensive, 10 times more expensive to acquire a customer than it was 5-8 years ago, let's say, when I got started in this. So that is now expensive. It is really, really hard, really, really expensive to acquire a customer on Instagram or on Facebook. Infinitely harder than it was even 4 years ago, okay? And this is sort of the worst case scenario that everyone in the industry was warning people about. And maybe you've heard this before, is that people always said the hazard with social media is that you're building an audience that you don't own. So if you have 1 million followers on Instagram, Instagram still controls your access to those 1 million followers. Or if you're paying Instagram to show your ad to people, they are still controlling who sees your ad and how often. You are not in control of that. And so this is sort of the worst fear that people in the industry have had. We've all said for years, if you're building an audience on YouTube, on TikTok, on Instagram, on anything that is not direct messaging, which is basically iMessage, WhatsApp, SMS, telephone numbers, or email, you're taking a massive risk in that one day these platforms will not exist, or they will not work as well as they once did. And your business is going to be out of luck if you don't have a way to communicate directly with this audience that you've built trust with. And this is exactly what we're seeing now. So what we're seeing now is it's really, really hard to connect with your customers on Instagram, on Facebook. So those people that built email 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 6 months ago are at a massive advantage, because the ability to email a customer has not become any more difficult. It is as easy now as it was in 1994 if you're not sending spam, basically. It's a direct thing. It's the same as sending somebody something in the mail. And that's why, any channel that is direct. So I said email, but I also mentioned, if you can create a WhatsApp group, a Discord group, anything where you have direct contact with people, that is the most valuable single thing that you can do for yourself as a marketer and as a business.
All right. So another question I've got, I understand, what you said about paid media, but if I'm going to spend money on paid media, any tips for me on where I should be spending my money?
That's a really good question. If you're going to be spending money on paid media now, what I would recommend doing is spending that money with people that have already worked out how to reach audiences through paid media. So generally what that's going to mean is partnering with influencers or influencer agencies or other brands even that are in your community or in your industry. The direct buying thing, especially if we are a new brand, if you're trying to get new customers, if you're trying to unseat, a brand that has a lot of market share, if you're starting a shoe company or a clothing company or any of these things, it's going to be very difficult for you to bid against the Nikes, the whoever's, in order to get that space from Facebook. So we're in a situation in a lot of paid media where money is going to win. Okay. So what we need to think about is, where is there still opportunities? There is still opportunities in places where content is consistently being created every single day, and that content is not yours. So there are people who are very, very good at specifically building audiences. They're amazing at it. And actually all they do is build audiences. These are creators on TikTok, on YouTube, some people on Instagram, every channel. There's these really popular people who all they know how to do is build audiences. They're incredible at it. The overlap between the people who know how to build audiences and the people who know how to build businesses is incredibly small. If what you are trying to do is build a business, I do not recommend that at the exact same time as doing all the incredibly difficult things that we have to do as small business owners, that you also attempt to focus 100% of your energy on building an audience. Okay, that's not a great use of your time. So what do? You go to those people who are focused 100% on building audience, and you say, I will pay you $100, $500, $1,000. Let me borrow your audience. So where are these opportunities existing? Huge one, podcasting. There is, it's a joke at this point that everybody has a podcast. It's also true. And why does everyone have a podcast? Because there's an infinite amount of space to spend money on advertising. So if you find a podcast of people that are in your community, and again, because everyone has a podcast, what that means is that somewhere out there, there is a niche for people who are exactly your customer profile. So you can have any customer profile. You can have, new immigrants to Canada who came from X, Y, and Z country who like X, Y, and Z sport. So you could have, like you, for example, you could have South African immigrants who love hockey in Ontario. There's probably a podcast for them. Find that podcast, sponsor that podcast, pay for ads. That's a quick way to get into that community. So anywhere where there's people constantly creating content, where their very livelihood depends on the fact that they are continually creating new content. So podcasting is one. YouTube, of course, is another one. TikTok, again, another one. Instagram wouldn't really do that these days. It's not great conversions, but anywhere that you see people that have big audiences, look at those places as an opportunity to find somebody who is the perfect megaphone to your audience. If we're looking at, Marshall McLuhan media theory, these are the people who spread out the message. They're the nodes. So find these people who have already amassed an audience and say, hey, I'm a brand with X, Y, and Z values, or for X, Y, and Z community, and I want to give you money so that your audience can become my customers. This is, again, when we're talking about this e-commerce ecosystem, we think about it from our perspective, but there is also so many people out there who make their livelihood because they are actually a place for us to sell our products and services. So tap into that ecosystem, look at people who already have audiences. Once again, this is the key takeaway here. Don't build your own. Definitely don't pay for your own. Go out there and find people who already have one and align with them on a genuine one-to-one human-to-human basis. Give them a call on the phone. It's terrible, but you have to do it. Have a Zoom meeting with them and say, hey, this is what we're trying to do. We're a new e-commerce brand that does X, Y, and Z. And here's why we think your audience would like us. So creators are always looking out for what their audiences are going to like, because they are in the business of increasing their audience. And the way you increase your audience, of course, is by consistently pleasing your audience. If you're doing things that your audience like, your audience is going to tell other people, you're going to become a big creator. It's pretty simple math on their end. So you're giving them a value proposition. You're saying, hey, we think that your audience would like our product. Here's a thing that you can advertise to them. And actually, this is my last point on this because I feel very passionately about this, so I could go forever. But actually, you're doing these people a massive favor. I mean, people think, oh, if I go to my favorite YouTube creator or my favorite podcaster or whatever, and I approach them with advertising, they're going to be annoyed and maybe their fans don't want to listen to ads or whatever it might be. But if you're a fan of a YouTube channel or a podcast or anything, you would much rather see ads that are actually relevant to your interests than ads that aren't. If you're a hockey fan, you would rather hear ads about hockey than about banks. This is very, very simple. So you're actually doing them a massive favor by allowing them to create content that is consistent all the way through, even in their advertising, with who they are, what they value, and what their audience cares about.
So if you're a Main Street small business in a small community, for example, are there people you can reach out to, locally, that could help you, increase the amount of eyeballs you get to your website and things like that. So say you're running a Main Street small business and you've got a part of your business is an e-commerce website. What type of people would you reach out to in the local community, and some ideas on what marketing you could do locally?
Absolutely. So the thing that I would say is, especially when it comes to local small businesses, we have this idea that because we're dealing with e-commerce, that our marketing should exclusively be online. And that's not specifically true. And that's not even the most beneficial or the primary strategy or even the first thing that we should be attempting. So what we want to be thinking about, whether it's online or offline, is where are the logical connections between the need that I fill in the market and the kind of person that has that need. So if you're a Main Street business, let's say you're a dry cleaner. Let's say you're a dry cleaner. You're a dry cleaner in Mississauga. You have to think about where are the people that are my customers and how can I get in front of them? So if you're a dry cleaner, the thing that you're dealing with is a tight radius, right? Because you're a dry cleaner here, but if someone lives 3 blocks over, they might go to a dry cleaner 3 blocks over. So you need to think about, what are people around here doing? Where are they going? Where are they going to get their groceries? Where are they going to get their bread? Where are they going to buy their milk? And I know in some parts of Ontario, that's more difficult, where we don't have that real Main Street small business energy. But in a lot of parts of Ontario, most parts of Ontario, I'd argue, we do have that. We do have the local butcher, the local baker, the local flower shop. So look at where your customers are actually going, where they would be shopping locally, and work out how you can co-collaborate, how you can market. The newspaper is maybe not the best example of where people are looking for information, but maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, that would have been the case. Where are people finding out information? Where are people making decisions? So approach those other small businesses in your community, of course, unless they're direct competitors. But if you are somebody that has a e-commerce presence, for example, and there is a store maybe that sells products that are products like yours, what you could do is, instead of only having your products in your store, also have your product in Maria's store down the street and have a little link there that says you can also buy these products online, right? So we tend to think of this as this really like separate thing where it's like, it's online, so it needs to be online and all my customers need to be online. But actually, e-commerce is just this sort of banner. It's just this sort of place that we send people. So if I'm in Maria's store and I don't know your store, I might not walk into your store, but if I see your products in Maria's store and I go, oh, I really like Andrew's ceramics, let me go to his website. And then I go, oh, actually, he's just down the street. So I think thinking of your website more as a piece of marketing material and not so much as a destination. So collaborate as tightly as you can with people that are already in your community. I mean, it could even be something like, putting up a flyer. I think there's no marketing, especially when we're young in the e-commerce game, and especially when we are local small businesses. There's no level of marketing that is beneath us. Obviously, because the most effective marketing, of course, for most of us, is still going to be word of mouth. And that's not a strategy that you can really use in e-commerce. Word of mouth doesn't really work on the internet unless you have reviews and all of these sort of things. So I would say try go traditional, and try see ways that you can sort of, spread your surface area. Where else are your customers going to be? And how can you use your website as sort of a calling card or a business card that people can use to find out more about you once they already have a little bit of context, right? So another example would be, let's say you bake cookies. You go to every coffee shop in your neighborhood and you say, hey, can we sell my cookies in your coffee shop? And then on the cookies, you have your e-commerce website there. And then people go to your e-commerce website and they can make cookie deliveries. So it's really about thinking of how can you get that URL, that e-commerce website, all of those things in front of as many people as possible when it comes to being a Main Street business, which is slightly different, at least at the beginning, from being a sort of big e-commerce brand.
I really like the idea of the collaboration. I think it's so important. Even when you were speaking earlier on about email marketing, I mean, why not do a joint email marketing campaign with a bunch of other Main Street small businesses, or speak to your BIA and see if they can create something that we can send out jointly, which would be a really good idea. I really like that. So I've got a couple of questions when it comes to online content. I mean, does having online content help you at all when it comes to search engine optimization, or more importantly, for customers finding you? And if you put online content on your website, what should you do? That's the first question. And the second one, even when you send out emails, so let's say you're going to send out a regular email once a week or once every 2 weeks, what content should you be putting into these marketing materials?
I will answer these questions as two different questions because in my mind, there are two different questions. So I will start with the email thing because it leads more easily into the SEO thing. So when you're thinking about sending an email, the number one rule for any piece of marketing really is make it something that your audience would actually care about, would actually be excited about. What is an email that your audience would actually want to open? And the answer to that question dictates everything about what your content strategy should be. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is that if you think that, let's say you're a fashion store, okay? And your audience is very into clothing. And you obviously, know this because you're a fashion store, but also when your customers come into the store, they're always asking you questions about, oh, did you see what Beyonce wore? Or did you see what Taylor Swift wore or whatever? Obviously, I'm showing that I don't know anything about fashion, but the point being, what your customers like, and what your customers find most valuable about the thing that makes you you, right? So let's say you decide the thing that I'm going to do is every time there's a Met Gala or every time there's a charity ball or every time it's the Oscars, I'm going to send out an email that is saying what my favorite outfits were from the Met Gala or my favorite outfits from the Oscars or whatever that might be. So I'm not saying this is a super strong email strategy. I'm saying it's an idea. It's actually a great place to start. So you say, I'm going to send out an email every time there's an event, and I'm going to tell people what my favorite looks were. And I'm also going to connect it to products in our store that look like these famous dresses or these famous outfits. So if you want to dress like the stars, here's how you can do it. Okay. That's a great concept for an email marketing, thing. If you tell your customers that this is what they're going to get when they're going to sign up for the email, you actually have a high possibility that a lot of people are going to be interested in this. The issue, or not even the issue, let's just say the limitation of that strategy is that you can only email people when there is a Met Gala or when there's an Oscars or when there's a Golden Globes, right? But at least you are identifying that, and at least you're acknowledging this fact. You're acknowledging this limitation. You are saying, if that is my strategy, I can only send emails when I have an email worth sending, okay? We want to keep this in mind always when we're talking about specifically email, but I mean any content that we're making, is I should only do it when my audience is going to find it worth it. So in this case, maybe you only get to send 4 emails a year or whatever it might be, but it also wouldn't make sense to send, an email every week because you don't have enough events that your audience is going to care about or know about or whatever it might be. So knowing what your audience is interested in and knowing that you're actually going to send an email that they're going to be excited to open is the number one thing. And that should dictate everything else. So that should dictate how often do you send that email. Often what I see is people saying, we want to send an email every week. Okay. And they go out of the blue. They just go, we want to send an email every week because we want to be on top of mind for our customers. And so we're going to send an email every week. They haven't thought about why their customers would want to open an email. So the easy fallback is we have to send an email every week. Maybe we should do a discount every week because then that way we have something to email our customers about. Okay. And then you end up discounting forever. If you think about it the other way, which is what do our customers really like? What would our customers be really interested in? And what do I, as a business owner, or what does my team or the writer that I hire or outsource to or whatever, what do they want to write about? What are they excited about? What do they want to share with people? And then go, okay, how often can we send this email? Maybe it's once a month, we're rounding up our favorite things. Or maybe it's once every 2 weeks, we're saying, hey, these are the products that we bought in the last 2 weeks. Or these are the books that we read in this month. Or these are the books that we read this quarter. Or these are the books that we read this week. So your frequency should be dictated by how many interesting things you have to talk about. Okay. So that's when it comes to email. And what should you be talking about? You should know what your audience is interested in. I don't mean that in a diminutive way. I mean, if you keep your eyes open to it, you will see what is it that you're interested in? What YouTube videos are you watching? What Netflix shows are you watching? What are your customers talking to you about when they come into the store? If you look at your Google reviews for your shop, what do customers say is the best part about your store? Do they say that it's the stories that you tell? Do they say that it's, your understanding of the history of this industry or whatever it is? Whatever that thing is, that is the thing that you should focus on, because that's what's going to get people to want to open your emails. And then when you send an email that is a promotion or that is a sale, they're going to go, oh, I love opening emails from Andrew. I'm going to open this email. Oh, and guess what? It's a sale. And guess what? I already like Andrew and I open his emails every time. So I'm going to buy from him. That's email. That's over here. When we're talking about content marketing, which is content on our website that we're using for search engine optimization, the reason that we would do that is that Google is indexing websites all the time, and a way that Google decides, what website to send people to is based on what content is on the website, along with a million other things. But the idea that Andrew's talking about here is search engine optimization. So if somebody searches for car washing in Oakville, our business comes up as car washing Oakville. Okay. So basically, search engine optimization is when people are searching specifically for our business or searching around our business, as we call it, they find us. What content should we be creating in that realm? That is a different question to what content would somebody open every single week if I were to send them an email. So most Google searches, when you think about it, are based on needs. For most of us, especially if we're in service businesses, or for most Main Street businesses, the needs that we are serving are based on immediate questions. So, let's use the example of the dry cleaner. Maybe I just spilled red wine on my jacket, and I'm curious, can I get red wine out with baking soda? Or do I have to go to a dry cleaner? Okay. If you have run into any problem in your life, if you've ever thought that you have bed bugs, or if you've ever had an unidentified spider or something in your house, then you also have run across these websites where they say, here's how to identify the top 10 spiders that we have in Ontario. The easiest way to get rid of that is getting an exterminator. Don't try to get rid of it yourself. Call an exterminator right away. Oh, you don't know an exterminator. Guess what? We're an exterminator. Call us. Our number's right here. Okay. So what we want to be doing in these cases is filling a void for people in our local area and giving them the answers to questions that they are searching for. How do we know what these things are? On a very simple level, we can sort of sit down as a business and think about, what do people want to know? What do people need to know? What do I know from my experience in the business that people are curious about? Yours might, for example, might be, how do I start a business in Toronto? How do I start a business in Ontario? How do I start a business in Canada? What things do I need to start a business as a solo entrepreneur? Do I need to register my business to start a business in Ontario? See, so we're already going, here's all the questions that our customers might have. If you do not know the answers to these questions, or if you don't know what these questions are, the easiest way to discover these questions is by straight up asking your customers. Next customer who comes into your store with a question, you write it down. Our customers are talking to us all the time. If we just open our ears to it, we will know exactly what customers who don't come into our store are also wondering. A customer will come and they say, oh, by the way, what about blah, 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 blah. Every single question that our customers ask us is extremely important. Even if we're at, let's say we are a dry cleaner, we also have a tailor service. If someone says, by the way, how long does it generally take to alter a pair of pants? How long does it take to alter a pair of pants is a question that people are asking a million times a day. So maybe that's an idea for, 10 questions about dry cleaning that you never knew, and you can create that as a blog post. Generally there's people that we should or could, I'm a little bit biased, but we should or could get to help us with this. But if you want to start looking into an idea of what these questions might be around in your industry, a little thing that you can do is you can go to a website called askthepublic.com. That's ask, A-S-K, thepublic.com. Type in your industry and just see what questions people have. It collects common questions from Google, and it'll show you what kind of things people are looking at. That's a really simplified version of what SEO is and how to win at it. But it's, I think, enough to get a start or to help you understand who you should be looking for or what you should be thinking about.
I think some great advice there, some really simple ideas, but some really great advice. And I liked both the answers to those questions. Now, do you have any ideas? I've heard about this thing, people speak about A/B testing. What is this A/B testing thing people speak about?
So A/B testing is one of the innovations of marketing that makes it different from offline marketing, which is that it gives us the ability to, let me start this again. Often when it comes to marketing, we don't know how to make decisions because we don't know what works. So we often make a decision assuming that it's the correct decision, and that decision is based on our own personal preference. So if we're creating an ad and we have two product photos, let's say we're an ice cream store, and one is a happy family skipping down the street eating ice cream, and another one is a close-up of ice cream melting on someone's hand. We might go, I'm a family store. I like the idea of a family skipping down the street with the ice cream. We're going to choose the ice cream, the family photo for our ad. And then the ad goes out, and you never know if you made the right decision or the wrong decision because you never tested both of those options. You couldn't say definitively, was that the correct choice? Was that the choice that would result in more customers, in more sales? Was it objectively better? When we are talking about marketing, especially when we're talking about paying for marketing, the thing that we want to be doing is being as objective as possible. We want to be operating essentially in data. It's boring. It sounds boring because it is really boring. But what an A/B test allows us to do in that scenario is to send both of those ads out into the world and to say, 5 people are going to get it's usually bigger numbers, but for this example, 5 people are going to get the family photo of the ice cream. 5 people are going to get the close-up of the ice cream cone. We are going to see which ad actually empirically converts better, and then we're going to invest money in that ad. So that's what A/B testing is on a pure, data level. What it means for us as small businesses, most of the time, what it means is, and this is a good advice for everything, actually. I do a lot of, brand strategy and copy and all of these sort of things. And a big mantra in that area of e-commerce, of actually thinking about how people think about our brand, is never assume that, the first idea that we have in any creative industry is going to be the right idea. We want to use as many ideas as we possibly can and see which one is the best one, because we don't know. Everything that we do is based on personal preference. So what that means is using the tools that are available to you. And in e-commerce, we all have tools about conversions, about hit rates, about bounce rates, about abandoned carts, about all of these things. Use these tools available to you to run small, controlled, independent tests. So you can A/B test, for example, by saying, what should the first line of copy or of text be when you arrive on my website? Should it maybe say, delicious donuts in Mississauga? Or should it say, want donuts? Click here for fast delivery. Those are both great options, sure. We don't know which one's going to work better. So we can A/B test by simply looking at that data, saying for this week, we're going to use, this piece of copy. Next week, we're going to use a different piece of copy. And in the third week, we're going to look back at how each of these things performed and we're going to go with the one that worked better. So basically, A/B testing means don't assume that you have the correct answer. You have to know for certain in marketing that you have the correct answer, because at the beginning it might not matter, but once you start extrapolating and spending money on things, making mistakes is very expensive, and not making as much money or as many sales as you possibly can is definitively a mistake.
I think that's great advice, because we often say that, small business owners should be measuring the results. I mean, that's a great example of how to do that. Okay, so we got one final question. We got 3 minutes, and I'd just like you to give us a bit of a summary of what you've discussed and just some general tips. One of the biggest challenges businesses have is abandoned carts. Do you have any just basic tips on how do we solve that, or how do we reduce the amount of abandoned carts? Do you have any tips on that?
Absolutely. So my perspective on abandoned carts is that abandoned carts happen, and often abandoned carts happen for reasons that we don't know or don't understand or aren't aware of. We cannot assume, unless we have a real big problem, unless we have like 100% abandoned carts or something, that people are abandoning carts for reasons that have to do with us. So there's this idea in, emotional intelligence, or, in like self-help world, where it's like nothing anybody does has anything to do with you. And what this means is that if your partner comes downstairs and shouts at you, it's not because you did anything wrong. It's probably because they're having a bad day. And this is what you want to think about when it comes to your customers. You want to imagine them as the most finicky people ever. So they were sitting there, they were ready to put their credit card in, and I do this all the time. And then you go, oh, where's my wallet? Oh, I don't know where my wallet is. I'll buy this later. I'll buy this tomorrow. I'll whatever, right? Buying from your store is not the number one thing in their life. It's the number one thing in our life. It's very important to us. But for them, it's just another thing that they're doing. They don't actually care. So abandoned carts by themselves are not really an indicator of something being wrong, unless, again, they're an epidemic. What is more important when we have abandoned carts is using the opportunity to recover carts, okay? And that means two things. One of which means having an actual abandoned cart flow. So this comes default in, I think, almost all e-commerce platforms at this point, certainly in Shopify, where when people abandon carts, you send them an email giving them the opportunity to basically unabandon the cart. You give them an opportunity to say, just like I did, the email can say, hey, did you forget your wallet? Now's your chance to buy. Did you forget that you were buying? Because there's so many times where literally that's all that happened. Somebody forgot. They opened the thing. They said, oh, someone said, actually, do you want to go for lunch now? And they went, yep. They closed their laptop. They went for lunch. Nothing happens. So you send them an email 6 hours later, 8 hours later, 12 hours later, the next day saying, hey, did you just forget? In the event that you just forgot, do you want to just buy it now, maybe? So that's a very important thing to have, is an automated process that sends out abandoned cart emails that reminds people of the fact that they did abandon cart. Just by implementing this, you will see a huge amount. It's always baffling, actually. You see a huge amount of abandoned cart recoveries, and therefore a huge amount of profit and revenue for your business. The other side of it, the advice that I like to give is when you are small, be small. So abandoned cart flows are amazing. And especially as you become larger, having these automated email flows is incredible because you don't need to do anything. You set up the abandoned cart email automation. You can make it as complicated as you want. You leave it and it sends these people emails and they convert into customers and you don't do anything. And that's great. And that's wonderful. But when we are small, we have the opportunity to be small. What I would encourage you to do actually at the very beginning of your business, if you have time for it, if you do not, stop listening now. But if you have time for it and if you care, and it's okay not to care to know this information, but individually email people and say, hey, I am the owner of this business. I've just started this business. I want to make sure that you have a good experience. Why did you abandon the cart? 99% of the time, people will say, oh, I literally just forgot. Or they will say, which is so common and we just never think about it. They'll say, oh, I get paid on Thursday and I opened your website on Monday. When I get paid on Thursday, I'll buy it. I still want to buy it, but I'll do it on Thursday. So they've legitimately forgotten. But in 1% of cases, somebody will tell you a piece of information that will absolutely change your ability to convert customers. They will say, oh, I didn't understand how the sizing worked. And so I felt a little bit apprehensive about spending $50 on this product because I don't know if I'm between a size this and that, and I don't really know. So then you could go, oh, I'll create a sizing chart, put it right there on the product page. And then maybe hundreds of other customers have abandoned cart for that reason. So my advice is, if you can, and if you care, and it's, again, I'm not saying care in an objective sense. If that's something that's interesting to you and you have the time to do it, personally send emails out to these people and say, hey, can you help me out? Can you tell me why you abandoned cart? You might learn something, but otherwise, literally just put the automated abandoned cart email thing that says, hey, you forgot to buy, click on this link to buy now. And that will create a massive influx of sales for you. So we don't need to worry necessarily about not capturing those sales. What we need to worry about is that those people never, ever turn into a customer. That's what we don't want. It's okay if they don't buy immediately, but we want eventually to capture as many people as possible who intended at some point in time to buy from us.
Well, that was one of my favorite examples you shared there, with a really simple thing, but very, very customer friendly. Okay, so we come to the top of the hour. Why don't you just give us a little bit of a summary for us? And thank you very much, everyone, for sending me these questions through. They're really useful. But just give us a bit of a summary of what you discussed today, and then we can end off the mastermind.
Sure. I think in summary, I would actually start where we ended, which is a piece of advice that I would give all small businesses, and that I wish I could actually give big businesses, but they can't follow it, which is, when you are small, be small. So a lot of the questions that we've discussed today and a lot of issues that small business owners in general are facing are because they're trying to be big. They run into issues that are very difficult for big businesses. But as small businesses, we actually have an unfair advantage of being personal, of being small. So all of the issues that we talked about today, the increase in ad spending and how much that costs, sort of the inability to compete on things with SEO and all of those things. The answer to all of these things always is, if you are small, be small. So if you are a local community brand, talk to businesses in your local community. That's where you should spend your marketing dollars. That's where you should spend your time. If you, again, are doing things like email automation, at the beginning, you really should try and be small and pretend that you don't know what the big brands do, because this is a huge opportunity to find out what is actually going to matter to your customers. And the way that you're going to grow a business as a small business is by connecting one-on-one, one customer at a time. And that's really the biggest tip. You can spend as much marketing budget as you want, but I guarantee you that any of your massive competitors wish that they could have the same opportunity that you did to be absolutely authentic and to mean what they say every time they say something. So that's a huge opportunity that we have as small businesses, and that I want everyone to take advantage of. So when you run into an issue, or when you run into a challenge, or when you run into a marketing decision, the thing that I want you to ask is, what would a business as small as mine do? So, it's not about marketing budget. It's not about what ads I'm putting out. It's what is literally the atomic level of marketing, and how can I achieve that? Because what we really don't want to do is be spending time, be spending money, be spending energy in places that we don't have to be, because other bigger brands are. So that's really my closing advice. And I think indeed a summary of what we've been talking about is that focus on your community at this time. As things get more expensive on e-commerce, what we're going to have to do is turn in and actually use e-commerce as a way to strengthen our Main Street businesses, and not the other way around as it has been for the last 3 or 4 years.
Thank you very much, Marco. That was really interesting. There's one just final question that I'm going to answer quickly. Angelica asked, what is a decent marketing budget for online presence? So basically, normally we share this number with small business owners. Angelica, usually 3 to 5% of your revenue you want to allocate to marketing if you're a retail type business. And if you're a service business, you allocate between 10 and 20% of your revenue. But again, it depends on the nature of business. Thank you very much, Marco. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining me this afternoon. I found the discussion very, very interesting. Sign up for the upcoming events and let us keep educating you. Thank you very much, and have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.